Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us across the vast Louisiana plain, where we are advancing the cause of freedom and liberty and constitutional conservatism, elevating the cause of constitutional conservative candidates, slowly but surely draining the Louisiana swamp. My name is Chris.
And I'm Danielle, and this is the State of Freedom, brought to you by freedom-loving Louisiana First Patriots. Well, hello, State of Freedom warriors. We are so grateful for you. We're so honored that you would have us with you for part of your day. We're only here because of your encouragement, your friendship, your prayers, and your financial support. If you're looking for a way to support us, to advertise with us, or to send us feedback, please visit our website at freedomstate.us. We'd love it if you'd help us get the word out and spread the reach of the State of Freedom. If you want to do that, just like the show on whatever platform you listen to it on, subscribe to it, share it. Don't forget we're on YouTube, we're on Rumble, and the links to those are always in the show notes and over on freedomstate.us. Moms for Liberty East Baton Rouge Parish Chapter is dedicated to fighting for the survival of America by unifying, educating, and empowering parents to defend and take back their parental rights at all levels of government. To learn more or to get involved with Moms for Liberty East Baton Rouge, email momsforlibertybatonrouge@gmail.com. That's moms, the number 4, libertybatonrouge@gmail.com. The email address is on the Patriot page of our website, freedomstate.us, and it's in the show notes. Well, we have the distinct pleasure of having a friend of the show, a fighter for the unvarnished truth, a man who has one of my absolute favorite X accounts, the sitting Utah State Rep and candidate for governor, Phil Lyman, joining us today. Before we bring on Phil, let me read the scripture of the day. It's John chapter 14, verse 27, and it says, "I leave the gift of peace with you, my peace, not the kind of fragile peace given by the world, but my perfect peace. Don't yield to fear or be troubled in your hearts. Instead, be courageous." Before Jesus was arrested, he was preparing his disciples for the fact that he would be leaving them and sending Holy Spirit in his place. And this is one of the kind of final encouragements he gave them at this time. He was imparting them with the gift of perfect peace. And the shalom peace of God goes far beyond our modern Western understanding of peace. It's much more than a feeling. It speaks of supernatural health, peace, welfare, safety, soundness, tranquility, prosperity, perfection, fullness, rest, and harmony, as well as the absence of agitation and discord. That is the kind of peace that our Savior Jesus has given to us as a gift. It's a holistic and all-encompassing peace. And like with any gift, it's our part and our responsibility to reach out and receive it if we want to be able to access it and take it as our own. As we take on that kind of peace, he expects us to live courageously and without fear or worry, because his all-encompassing peace has equipped us to do that. His all-encompassing peace gives us the bold confidence that David had when he said in Psalms 27, "Whom or what shall I fear?"
And we have to reach out, Danielle, and claim it. Reach out and claim it through his power and his grace, not our own. And there are times when, fear can creep up on us, and we have to refocus and recognize, no, you have overcome all evil. And in you, we have peace and we have victory, and you will always sustain us and be always faithful. But we just have to stay focused every day. Speaking of someone who knows a lot about focus, the gentleman whose name you mentioned a minute ago, Representative Phil Lyman, state representative from Utah, candidate for governor, challenging the recent Republican primary election results in Utah. Phil, thank you for joining us today. What a pleasure to have you.
Well, the pleasure is mine, I guarantee. And thank you so much for the scripture and the introduction.
You're most welcome.
Just by way of background here, why did you, just so our listeners who may not be familiar with you as they are in Utah, and for some context here, before we get into the mechanics and logistics of what actually happened in your race, why did you decide to run for governor to begin with? What was your motive?
Well, I kind of got into politics because of seeing some things that made me upset, seeing some agencies weaponized against the people that they're supposed to serve, and doing some bad policy driven by collusion at the very top and not knowing where that's coming from. So I went through the ranks of the county commission, state legislature, and then looking at the governor's office, and the I guess just the way that it's managed in Utah. And I just felt like we could do better. I talked to a number of people before this election cycle to see if they would consider running, and none of them would. You're crazy to go up against an incumbent, and I saw what I thought was a huge gap in the line, and using a football analogy, and I still think there's a huge gap in the line, and decided I would run, and we did extremely well. I don't trust the results. I'll have to tell you, I really don't trust the results that are coming out right now, and I'll say that openly. But even given those results, we have put up a really good campaign.
It's interesting, Phil, that find it kind of insightful about you that you actually were, it wasn't like you were just consumed with ambition. You were trying to get other people to run for the office, other people who you thought were qualified and would do well. And apparently when no one else stepped up, you stepped up.
Yeah, well, it is about the people. It's about the people of Utah. They deserve a fair election. If Spencer Cox won this fair and square, got his signatures fair and square, obeyed the rules, all those things, then he'll have my 100% support. If he didn't do that, then he'll have my 100% opposition. And I at this point, I don't feel at liberty to do anything but oppose what I see as some genuine corrupt dealings.
And Phil, just for the sake of our listeners, would you give us a little bit of contrast between you and Spencer Cox?
Well, Spencer Cox has an R by his name, but he also is the only Republican governor to join Biden's American Climate Corps. He uses his pronouns to grade schooler kids. I vetoed the bill that would have prevented boys from competing in girls' sports.
A grown man in elected statewide office, using his pronouns?
Yeah. Officially as the governor. To grade school. And this is a few years ago during COVID, and a genuine culture war that we're having, where parents are being arrested for speaking up at school board meetings and dragged out for having the audacity to suggest that their kids not have to get the vaccine or wear a mask or whatever the case. And in the midst of all that, where parents are saying, parents have rights and people have rights, and he stands up and uses his pronouns, which just was a kick in the gut to me. Some people thought it was funny, and other people thought it was cute, and I just thought it was really appalling that he would do that. And I guess if I were going to contrast myself with Spencer Cox, I believe he sees government power as a top-down dynamic, because he really looks to the federal government. He seems to be really enamored with the Biden administration, especially. And then on the flip side of that, he wants to centralize all this power in the state under the state's control, and take it away from counties, take it away from municipalities. I see it the complete opposite. In a Republican form of government, power should be pushed to the closest to the people, and those people that are most affected by the decisions. So I love county government. I think counties are amazing. I think they should do much more in managing their public lands in Utah and managing their education systems. Speaking of the education system, we have this kind of regime of the state school board and all the 42 school districts, and they're expected to lock arms and stay in lockstep. And if anyone steps out, they get targeted. But we also have 925 parent councils over the 925 schools, and those should have much more say over what's happening in their schools, and much more say over how the resources are spent. Again, just pushing that power, dispersing it out as far as you can. I think a beautiful government would be just completely dispersed power. I think that's what the founders envisioned the Constitution, and it's not innovative. It's not creating something new. It's really saying, well, this is a Republican form of government. This is how it's supposed to work. Let's just do that. I think we could solve our problems really quickly.
Yeah, and what you said, Phil, about the emphasis on local governments really resonates with me. And there's no question that that's how the founding fathers envisioned it, because as a practical reality, the governments that are the closest to the people are the ones that are typically going to be held most accountable. There'll be more transparency on that level. And the farther you get away from the people, the less accountability and transparency there is. And I think that's just a matter of logic and common sense.
Yeah. And I would also add that the level of engagement
Yes.
decreases the further away you get as well, because people know that they don't have any ability to impact change.
And our adversaries know this. They know the complacency that comes from, you know, distant governments making centralized decisions, and people do give up, you know. And if they go up against it, they find out that the Department of Justice is not on their side. The agencies are not on their side. It's a recipe for despair. And our kids deserve to grow up in a country where freedom still means that you're free. I mean, that you get to, pursue your ambitions. And Utah, of all places, in my estimation, Utah of all places has the people who want that. It's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic how we kind of group together and get this group think. But I think it's collapsing. And when it does, it's going to be a really great day.
Yeah, and it will be a great day, and hopefully it's coming very soon. You've clearly painted a real philosophical and political contrast between you and your opponent, the incumbent governor in this race. More generally, Phil, and again, by way of background for our listeners, how do you get on? Because I don't want to get, we want to get more into the weeds of your race, but how do you get on? I know our process in Louisiana is one, other states have other processes. How do you get on the ballot for governor in the state of Utah?
Well, we've got the caucus convention system, so that your neighborhood caucuses elect delegates. They go to the convention, they nominate the candidates, and then they vote on those candidates, and they come through the convention system. Or since 2014, we created a new path, which is the signature path. So if you don't want to go through the caucus system, you pay a signature gathering company. They get 28,000 signatures if it's a statewide race, and that puts you on the primary ballot. And then once it's on the primary ballot, now it's kind of out of the party's hands and into the state's hands. And they say whoever wins the primary ballot then goes on to the general election.
Yeah.
It sounds like the party then becomes an apparatus of the
Yeah,
state
absolutely.
rather than the alternative, right?
Yeah, 2014, there was a bill passed, SB 54. And whether you like the signature out or don't like the signature out, I don't know how anybody can say that it's proper for the legislature to interfere with the party's business. It violates the contract clause of the Constitution. I think it violates the Article 4, the Republican form of government of the Constitution. And they should just leave. They should stay out of the party's business. The legislature should not be dictating how the Republican Party nominates its candidate.
Yeah. So you feel that the signature process, whereby a person can essentially write in by getting 28,000 signatures, and the legislature has now authorized that process since 2014. You think that's unconstitutional?
I do think it's unconstitutional. And the other thing that's, when you look at the color of law and what's actually happening is you've got a group of people, elite people in Utah, who they want the taxpayers to pay for sports stadiums. They want them to pay for large housing developments, downtown, high density. And you can look at the boards, whether it's, big league baseball or housing, or and then you get into it's the same people that want the SB 54. They call it the Count My Vote coalition. And it's the same people on their boards, the same 7 people that show up over and over and over. And then you look at the signature gathering company, and this is what blew me away just in the last couple of days. The main company that's gathering the signatures, you look at their board, same people. And so it's like, okay, you've got the biggest lobbying firm, who is also the biggest manager of people's campaigns, who is the biggest proponent of sports stadiums paid for by taxpayers, who now is also running the signature gathering process. And it's just like we've been captured. The whole thing is this construct by people who know exactly what they want, know exactly how to get it, and they expect and they bank on the fact that all of the people will just kind of stay asleep and let it happen.
That's incredible. I have a friend who's a state rep in Ohio, and I know to get on their ballot, she's running for state senate, she had to get a certain number of signatures to be able to get on the ballot. But I'm pretty sure you don't pay people to get those signatures done for you. I'm pretty sure it's a volunteer basis.
Yeah, you could get volunteer signatures in Utah, but there again, when you do that, and people that go the signature route, they have to submit those signatures to the lieutenant governor, and they have a massive disqualification rate. But when the lieutenant governor herself is evaluating the governor's signatures, and they're single tickets, the governor and the lieutenant governor are the same office, just shared between two people essentially. And so she oversees those, and the governor turns his signatures in within a couple of weeks after the start date, and boom, they're all verified and certified. But no one can look at those. You can't look at them. So they say, yeah, we got 28,000 signatures. They're perfect, and you may never ever see them. And it's like, well, I guess so much for transparency.
Yeah.
So much for transparency. Absolutely.
Phil, are you suggesting here that the governor did not have enough signatures to get on the ballot in the first instance, or that there was nefarious activity insofar as the outcome of the election itself?
Both. I'm not necessarily making allegations. I'm a CPA. In my world, we check systems. We look at things. If we see a system that has some inherent risks, then we see, well, what controls are in place to offset those risks, and could a person come in and verify what happened? And so that idea of verifiability, the signatures would be very easy to verify. And I'm not asking for myself to necessarily see them, but I want a CPA type person to come in and do what it is that they do, test that, look it over, and give an assurance report on that. Same thing I want for the elections. The results that are coming out, and the actual election results that are coming out, don't match a lot of people's what they were expecting to see from their own precincts, their own local level. They're saying, wait a second, there's no way that this is correct, but there's no way for them also to even ask a question. And this is the pattern that's happened in the past, is if you say, hey, that doesn't make sense with what we had polling or what we had going into this, instead of saying, well, let's take a look at it, come on in, let's see if we can explain this to you and you'll be satisfied. It's an immediate attack on those people as conspiracy theorists, and the media comes after them just relentlessly. And maybe that's the space that we fill right now is as a campaign, is to take all the darts and arrows of the adversary, which is the media, and take those ourselves, and instead of sitting back and watching individuals here and individuals there get attacked, we're doing it on a very large platform as a candidate, as a still a legislator. We've got standing because we won the convention 67.54% by victory there. So lots of things are in our favor, and we have a pulpit to talk about it.
Well, can you tell us, did you have any concerns about the election leading into the election, the process itself, about the integrity, the transparency, the ability for Utah elections to be audited? Were any of those things points of concern for you prior to this particular election?
Yeah, I've kind of led the charge on election integrity since the 2020 election, running bills to try to address that, taking a lot of beatings from over the last 3 years running these bills. But my biggest point that I kept emphasizing was the idea that this should be verifiable, and that somebody, an external qualified independent professional, should be able to take a look and run some statistical analysis, something. And what little information we've been able to get out of the system, we run the statistical analysis, and we show without question that there are precincts that had well over 100% turnout, which is impossible. So some that are 200 extra votes in a 200 member precinct, and you say, well, that needs an explanation. But instead of an explanation, what it gets is a real vicious attack on anyone who would suggest that we don't trust the clerks, which we're not blaming clerks on this. We're looking at the system and saying, We'd love to get some data on this or have somebody look at it. I mean, there's some audits going on right now. We're just wrapping up the primary election. It took place last Tuesday. So the final votes are still coming in. The lieutenant governor's office is doing what they call their post-election audits of the counties, which is essentially they go out and they pull a handful of ballots and they see if they look right, and if they don't look right, they make a note. That's it, and they go back in and it's done. But what we've got a few people that are taking the counts. They're counting up the vote tallies of these samples, and the vote tallies, the sample that they're coming up with, vastly different than the outcomes that they've reported officially. It's not terribly scientific. You can't really conclude anything other than you would expect if Spencer Cox won Salt Lake County by 65%, that maybe when they pull a sample that Cox would win that, but instead it's Lyman with 80%. Again, a small sample. And but if I were a statistician, I'd say, well, we probably ought to take a bigger sample and actually maybe look at some of this and see if there's a problem.
No kidding.
Yeah. It seems, Phil, that based upon the limited amount of information that you've been able to extract statistically, certainly there's an indication of the need to do a comprehensive audit of this election, and certainly to verify these signatures that that were coming in, and the idea that a company would be, a private company would be hired, presumably with a financial motive, to move forward and make sure they get enough signatures to make sure that a candidate appears on the ballot. And then going forward, it seems to me that you at least have an argument that there's a conflict of interest there when that occurs. I mean, has anybody ever said, look, we're getting paid to make sure that he gets enough signatures to get on the ballot and then moving forward? I mean, that seems like inherently suspect to me.
Oh, conflict of interest is just rampant. The lieutenant governor is the finance director of one of the candidates for the attorney general. It's like, why would you ever accept that position? And it's so blatant that you have to assume that it was deliberate, kind of like in your face, like, what are you going to do about it? And so I'm going to count his signatures as lieutenant. I'm going to count his signatures. I'm going to manage his finances. I'm going to work with his campaign people, and then I'm going to count the votes when it's all done. And you may never ever question or look behind the curtain. And
yeah,
and that's
because we're peasants. Phil. We're not capable of asking questions that are worthy of answers. Just to go back to your point earlier about the caucus convention process, it seems to me, and I don't know it in person, but it seems that sounds like it's a physical project. You go in person and you cast your vote, or you make your voice heard, maybe you raise your hand, whereas the signature verification is happening by a for-profit company in an unverified location, right? There's no real track record. People aren't even necessarily seeking out the opportunity to make their wishes known. Whereas in a caucus convention, you show up. It's like showing up to vote. You show up and say, I care about this. So to me, that makes a lot more sense. It holds a lot more weight in terms of people truly understanding what they're doing and being vested in the process. You got in your car, you went on a Tuesday night, you probably had to get off of work early or something, and you showed up so that you could make your voice known. It's not somebody showing up with an iPad at your front door saying, this is our guy. If just give us a second, maybe we'll give you $5 and you can click this thing. And I don't know that that's what's happening. I don't want to mischaracterize the signature collection process. But to me, if I were looking just as an outsider looking at this process, taking the effort to show up and to go and make your voice heard sure seems a lot more verifiable. It shows that people are interested.
and more inherently trustworthy.
Yes, exactly. So it's very interesting that there was, 10 years ago, you said 2014, this initiative to basically outsource that process and make it so that people who don't necessarily care what happens can have their name on a paper.
Yeah. Yeah. And what prompted that in 2014 was Mike Lee, Senator Lee, had beat Bob Bennett at convention. And and I look at these people that are running the show now, billions and billions of dollars invested in the state. And they have the attitude of, if you think we're going to turn this over to, a bunch of Boy Scouts, you're wrong. We're going to keep our people in leadership positions in the legislature, whatever it takes. And they work very hard to do that. Some avenues, whether they're ethical or not, are legal. Other avenues, I think, are completely illegal that they're pursuing. And of course, the illegal ones, if you want to take it to a court, we have a really bad record of getting the state to rule against their own establishment. So it leaves us just fighting for everything we can get. The media absolutely is not on our side. So I'm so grateful when people like yourselves are willing to just tell the story.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to share a fantastic opportunity for State of Freedom listeners who are interested in investing in precious metals or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, actual dealer cost. They are beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees and no minimums. If you're just interested in purchasing metals at a great price, visit metalstacks.com/dwalker. Get to shopping. That helps me out. I get the commission. You can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. If you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect of Metal Stacks, email me directly at danielle@freedomstate.us for more information. Well, speaking of the story, some shenanigans have been happening in the aftermath of Election Day as well. I saw something on your X page about an alleged phone call that was between Spencer Cox and your wife that was completely made up. Would you just talk about some of the ridiculous propaganda that's coming out to just basically, I think, in an effort to discredit you?
I mean, so I went through my prosecution, and I think we've talked about that before. So I was prosecuted by the line management for a misdemeanor, conspiracy to trespass. No one's ever heard of it before or since. Got a pardon from Donald Trump after the whole thing was over. So it's kind of a high profile issue, but I did do 10 days in jail. And Spencer Cox did call Jody and left her a minute long voicemail saying, hey, this is Lieutenant Governor Spencer Cox, and just calling to see how you're doing, blah, blah, blah. It meant a lot to us. And this is the part that's painful. It's like, it meant a lot to us. I mean, she still has it on her phone. We're almost 10 years now. She still has it on her phone, and she's changed phones several times. She's moved that voicemail because it's like, oh, Lieutenant Governor called me and left me a nice message. So for him to bring that up, in his victory speech, which by the way happened 45 minutes after the polls closed, and to say, I went out of my way. I called Phil's wife the night he went to jail, and we cried on the phone for 30 minutes. And number one, anyone that knows Jody knows that she's not crying. I've hardly ever seen her cry. I've seen her get really, really angry.
But, yeah, right. That's the emotion of choice.
And she's a hardcore patriot, very loving person, would cry over if one of her grandkids, had a sad day or something, but not this situation. And it didn't happen. I guess that's the point is, Governor, don't number one, don't bring that into this discussion at all. And then if you're going to bring it in and you bring it in with a total fabrication, it's dumb to do. And it's manipulative. And what is it you wanted to accomplish there? It's like, while Phil was in jail, I was the one that was there for Jody, for a shoulder to cry on, because Phil was, and the whole thing is just gross to me. And I was so proud of Jody for cranking off the video.
Yeah, we'll link to it in the show notes because I thought it was pretty epic what she did.
She did a good job, and Jody's a very likable person, and she was getting phone calls from people that night after Spencer Cox had said that, and we didn't know, we didn't see the thing, and they're like, "Hey, did you cry on the phone with Spencer Cox?" And she would say no, and they're like, "Oh, good, because I know you, and it didn't seem like something you would have done," and so the fact that it's just a complete made up story. He did call. He did leave a voice message, and it was a minute long. And again, meant a lot to us. It means a lot less to us now.
Yeah. Well, if he had done it, even if that whole situation had played out exactly how he said, it is really in poor taste to be saying that kind of thing in a victory speech.
Yeah.
It's not the right place. It's not the right tone. It's just weird.
It's just weird. Thank you.
That's to use the technical term. It's weird. Yes, it is. It's just really out of place. When I read about that, Danielle and I were like, "What is this? This is not even something that should be any part of a campaign or a victory speech or anything like that." So that's pretty odd.
That victory speech was just odd. He was so agitated, so angry. They said something about, are you frustrated something with attacks from the conservative right? I'm the conservative in this race. It's me. He's mean. He's not conservative. It's like, number one, I'm not mean. Number two, you're not conservative. And then he goes on with a big rant about all the things, Utah puts the Jazz first, and we love the sports, and we love all this stuff. And we're going to renovate downtown, and we're going to, do all these government things. It's like, okay, well, that's not a conservative speaking. That's Gavin Newsom 2.0. There's nothing consistent about this guy. Whatever he says this week, he'll say something different next week to a different audience, a different crowd. If nothing else, I believe that the people of Utah have gotten a better glimpse of who their governor is, and we'll figure out what he's capable of. But I know he's capable of some lies. We know that. So.
Well, he's demonstrated that. And, to your point, Phil, regardless of how this turns out, there's no question that you have opened the eyes of a lot of people in the state of Utah who have probably a very different understanding of who their governor is than they would have if you had not run and had not challenged him. That in and of itself is a very powerful service to the citizens of your state.
I agree. And thank you I don't really take any credit for it. Honestly, God's hand is always in these things, and the outcomes belong to him. And we watch things happen that are just, we're just in awe of the whole program. But I do know that he loves his people, his children, and he wants them to have the truth. And if we have any little hand in that, then it's a very satisfying thing, really, really invigorating. We've got more energy in the campaign this week after the election than we probably did the week before, because people are and it's not about getting the governor's seat. It's about, like you said, opening the eyes of the people, and it's happening. It's exciting.
You said in your quote, where you were talking about not conceding and why you were not conceding, you said, this is not about me. I'm one man, one candidate. This is about transparency. This is about the citizens of Utah being able to know that their election system is trustworthy and honest. So the fact that you perceive this as being something much broader and much more important than yourself and your race, I think is noteworthy and something that's very, very important. Do you expect, however, to see if they do the audit, they test the signatures, and you get basically the investigation that you want in this process? Do you expect significant irregularity to be uncovered? And if so, do you expect it to influence the outcome of the election?
I know it's like dangerous to answer a question. My opinion is yes, we would find some serious irregularities. I can crunch numbers myself. I can add and subtract and divide, and I can see things that warrant a deeper look. And when I did that after the 2020 election, I found, like I said, precincts that had over 100% turnout, which was concerning. It could be explained. There could be an error. But so irregularities, definitely we would find. It's an imperfect system with imperfect people. There's going to be lots of mistakes that are made. Whether there's fraud, I wouldn't go that far as to say there's fraud, but we would definitely see some serious irregularities that need some explaining. And on the signatures already, it needs some explaining. And the whole idea that the people that are running the point on the signatures, the same one running the point on the Count My Vote initiative, running the initiatives to get the sports stadiums and things like that. It's like, okay, this is too, it's too controlled by all the same people.
It's
Yeah.
too much.
Too
Well,
much.
Phil, what's the timeline to get this done? Because usually election, we've seen election challenges get run out by the clock.
The signature challenge probably has the most ability to potentially, put us on the ballot in November, which again is not the primary objective. The challenge on SB 54 itself, the constitutionality, the contract clause, the Republican form of government clause, that's going to be a long process. It would go probably to the Supreme Court and cost a lot of money, but there's a lot of effort behind that and a lot of interest in that. And then just verifying the elections, as we've seen, if anyone's been following that over the last few years, those challenges don't tend to go very far in the court system. So it's still an important one to bring up. We're asking for records. We're getting statistics on it, but likely the signature challenge is the one that's going to happen. And the timeline on that, we've got a hearing on the 18th of July that should give us some key information. Interestingly enough, and I don't want to belabor the point, but if you're a statewide candidate, then your signatures all got counted through the lieutenant governor's office, which was outsourced to a certain county, Davis County. But if you're a county-contained candidate, then your county clerk verified those signatures. And what we have are several races at the county level, or that were counted at the county level, using the same gathering company, where signatures were disqualified. In fact, found fraudulent. There's a criminal investigation going on one of these. And you say, well, if that's the same group that's gathering the signatures for this Senate candidate, state senator, that gathered for the governor, then we probably have the same signatures that were gathered on both of those, because the one person will go out and gather for six or seven candidates. Anyway, so those are little cross-reference things that have to happen. It's like, okay, if we know that we use the same company and these were disqualified, then we've got to see that the same signatures were disqualified at the state level.
Yeah, on the state level. Let me ask you one final question about this, Phil. I'm gathering, based on what you've said and some other things that we've read, that there are a significant numbers of Utah voters who, and some of the comments made on your Twitter or X feed, numerous comments, that there are a lot of citizens in Utah who really have doubts about the reliability of these results in your state. If that is the case, it seems like, let's say they go forward with an audit, and let's say that everything is on the up and up and everything is fine. Then the citizens walk away with renewed confidence that, okay, the election was honest. We can trust the process. Worst case scenario, you go and they do the audit, and you realize Phil Lyman actually won this election, and or the incumbent governor should have never been on the ballot to begin with. So it seems like there's, no matter where you stand, whether you're pro-Lyman or anti-Lyman, it just seems like the fundamental issue of transparency should militate strongly in favor of going forward and getting this done.
Right. It's a sound argument. It's a truthful logic that's going into that. And people that argue against it are really arguing maybe out of self-preservation of, they do not want to be on the side of the ones that are going to get ridiculed and attacked by the media and by the lieutenant governor's office. And I don't want to be, no one wants to be a sore loser. And that's what you get a lot of, oh, you're just a sore loser. Well, the fact that I know that I'm going to be called that, I don't want to be called that, but I'm willing to still stand up and say, I still want this. I still want these results. And regardless of what you do, I still want to see this. It resonates with people, with truth seekers. And I get so many people saying, how can I help? How can we be part of this? Thank you for standing up. And they're not saying, we know our elections are stolen and we're going to prove that. It's like, we want some transparency. That's all.
Yeah.
Just want to see.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think you're so right about your point on self-preservation being the guidestone of the people who don't, want to cover over this and say, well, let's just hurry up and move on. I think that group of people, that mindset of people, it's not really even just a group of people. It's an ongoing mindset we can see in so many different aspects of our society. The ends justify the means. You don't get to ask any questions because we are right. And what we want is right.
Yeah. And Phil, another factor I think that militates strongly in favor of the type of transparency that you're seeking here is look at other elections. Look at 2020. There's broad scale skepticism across the United States about the reliability of the 2020 election. There are probably 60% of Arizona citizens, if not more, have serious doubts about the reliability of the Lake Hobbs governor's election out there. There's a just broad-based skepticism about our election system and whether or not it actually reflects our intent all over the country now. So that's yet another reason why it seems like it would be a good idea for you to go forward and clear the air on this. And the fact that you're willing and that you want to do this, knowing that it may end up showing that you lost. And you're willing and you're willing to say that, okay, I lost legitimately, but the broader interest of all of us knowing that the elections are fair and secure outweighs my own personal interest. And I think that's one of the things that, frankly, I find the most impressive about you. The fact that your motives seem to be the welfare of your state and the integrity of our vote, and not your political ambitions, which really does set you apart from the vast bulk of political figures that I've seen.
Well, I promise you that is the motive, and I've got so many good people that I've got an envelope that I kept because it's a campaign contribution from a child with some coins in there, and it's like that means something. People are saying it means something, and the one that donates $100,000, that means something too. But those people that are engaged, that want, it's not trivial. Policy, comes down and it affects people's lives, and when it's done dishonestly, it's just we can't go down that path. And so I'm honored to associate with so many good people who are in the fight, and they don't want to give up. So. Again, I am just the candidate, but it's a privilege and an honor to be the candidate in this situation.
Well, thank you for being the candidate. How can people follow you? Give everybody your X profile, and how can people keep up with what's happening in this situation as it develops?
So we've got a website, Lyman for Utah. It's FOR, lymanforutah.com. It's got the links to Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And yeah, we've been killing it on Instagram, the X profile. I do have help with that because it's a lot of work, and so it's a little bit of a team effort, but it's been fantastic. So yeah, they can follow us on the social media things, and really just I would say, kind of disconnect from the narrative of the mainstream media and do your own. Believe what you're seeing. Believe your eyes, because you're in an interesting.
What a novel concept, Phil. What a novel concept. Well, I'll be honest with you. I think that more and more Americans, and hopefully more and more Utahns, are in fact disconnecting from the prevailing narrative. I truly believe it's the case. I think CNN, they may have 10 viewers on a daily basis now. I do speak hyperbolically, but really the mainstream media is steadily being replaced by alternative sources of media that people trust an awful lot more. Thank you for joining us today, Representative Lyman. It's such a pleasure to have you with us, and we're going to continue to follow this challenge, and wherever it leads, we know that you're going to be dogged until you get the answers that you and the citizens of Utah deserve.
Yep. Well, thank you. It's been great talking to you guys always, and thanks for what you do. It's such a great service.
God bless.
Well, thank you, and please stay in touch.
Will do.
We'll be praying for you, Phil.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The State of Freedom. To stay on top of all the calls to action we mentioned today, just check out the show notes for the episode. If you'd like to support the show financially, visit our website at freedomstate.us. If you'd prefer to give by mail, you can send a check to the State of Freedom, LLC, at P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana 70343. If you own a business in Louisiana and are interested in supporting our show by advertising, please email us at info@freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org, LACAG.org, or email Chris at chris@lacag.org. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe and share it. Give us a 5-star rating in the reviews. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.